to have little oases. Oases?
Oasi?
Oasi?
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bible Geeks podcast. This is episode 248. I'm Brian Sheely.
I'm Ryan Joy.
And thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Today, we'll explore the relationship between joy and happiness. Is joy automatic for Christians? Is it okay for Christians just to be happy? Maybe you've heard that happiness has been downplayed or thrown under the bus in some way, like it's shallow or empty. Maybe you've heard joy painted as some easy virtue for us all to achieve. How is joy like an oasis in the desert? We'll talk about that and how they're different, how they work together, and why both of these two things, joy and happiness, matter in a Christian's life. And then we'll wrap it all up with a promise from Jesus about full joy. We're excited to be back for another season. Ryan, you ready to go?
Let's do it.
Let's get into it. I was in the kitchen and I saw my daughter's day planner, and she has it sitting on the kitchen table, and it's been there for a while. And I walk by it every day, and I never actually made the connection of what was on the front of that day planner. And it's a Snoopy day planner for 2026. And it says, "Happy days ahead." And I was just like, yeah, that is the theme for this episode. Number one, that's also the theme for, I think, our season that we're in. Happy days ahead.
I love that. Yeah, my kids have been walking around singing this song they heard about, I'm about to have a good day. And that goes with that. Like, what a great way to orient yourself towards life is like the happiness and joy. Who doesn't want that? But, there are some complicated things that come with thinking through happiness and joy. And so we're going to sort through things and think through what is there a difference between happiness and joy and all of that. But maybe we start with just something that's making us happy. Like, that's a fitting place to start, right? What's making you happy this week?
Oh, man. There's so many things that I could be happy about, but one of the things here in Arizona that's obvious to most people is that it never rains here in the desert. And this last week, it started to think about hinting at rain. And last night, Sherilyn and I were at Costco, and we just start hearing like all of the phones buzzing around us about some like weather event that's going on. And we walked out of Costco like full cart, and just completely pouring buckets outside. And so we had to run through the rain and do all the pack in the car in the rain. And like, it was a ball, man. We had so much. I felt like a kid again. So that made me happy this week. The weather, and then, just playing out in the rain with my wife. It was great. How about you?
That is so awesome. Rain already is so special to, like, it's so such a cause of joy for me. And I think it comes from living in Arizona most of my life, where like, it's not that it doesn't rain very often. I mean, it does actually. You get a good bit of rain, but it is always really meaningful, and it smells so good. I think it smells better in Arizona than anywhere else.
Yep.
And I love getting out there. What's more, like, I'm recklessly, like David dancing in front of the ark than like going out in the rain and just like, you don't have to dance, just being out in the rain and like accepting I'm getting soaked, but I'm enjoying, the goodness of God in bringing this out. So I love that example.
I can see why a lot of people in other places would not enjoy rain as much, because like it happens all the time.
Seattle. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, here it's still great, but we get snow, and that's a blessing until it's not, and rain and sunshine. It's like we're ready for summer to be over now, but sunshine is great too. So
hold that in your back pocket. It's a blessing until it's not. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute.
So last night we had two young people over to the house that are going to get married next year. And it was just such a joy, Adrian and I sitting down and talking with them and hearing how excited they are to be with each other, and how their friendship and their, being weird together and feeling like they get each other in a way that like nobody else is in our world. And it was just, it brought me back to, this is what this is why I love marriage. This is why, have always been so excited to be in this special bond with a person that sort of, shares this oneness that nobody else does. So just thinking about the gift of marriage and excited about other people enjoying it. That's kind of on my mind here.
Did they finish each other's sandwiches?
Sandwiches, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they basically did, yeah.
All right. So, we're talking about joy, we're talking about happiness, and there's a lot of conflation with these two ideas. I think a lot of people get kind of hung up on what's the difference between joy and happiness. And, we'll get into some of the questions that we have here in a little bit in our next segment, which is called Deep Thoughts.
And now, Deep Thoughts.
All right, so here in this segment, I think we're going to get into 3 different levels of depth on the topic of joy and happiness. And I think it's helpful if we just start right on the surface where people get all mixed up about joy and happiness like we were just talking about. How do you see people, Ryan, get so mixed up about the difference between joy and happiness, or even just about happiness itself?
So we're going to distinguish them, but sort of acknowledge that a lot of times you could just use the two interchangeably.
Okay.
I mean, they're very similar ideas, but I think it is helpful as we get into this, we'll see it more, for your spiritual well-being to notice the distinction between happiness and joy. And just talking about happiness, one way I think people get mixed up about happiness is just chasing it like that is what all of life is about. I mean, I think that's almost a default setting for most people, is to think my purpose is to be happy. Like that's why I am here, and that drives everything I do. And so if I'm not happy, then there's this disruption in everything. It's like everything is wrong. And if I find something that makes me happy, then chasing it. And then oftentimes it's like happiness gets mixed up with like it's exactly the same thing as pleasure and comfort and ease, like these simple, which, hey, those things are nice,
Yeah.
and that they're not wrong in the proper biblical context. And so those are happy making things, but there's more to happiness than just seeking pleasure. And then, there's this deeper level. I mean, what about you? Where have you seen yourself or other people get mixed up about happiness?
Yeah, I think you're on to something there when you're talking about it being this almost like a pendulum shift. And that's the default thought process I have here. It's like when you allow your chasing and pursuit of happiness to go to the extreme, or to effectively push out your understanding of, that God doesn't want you necessarily as your whole goal in life to be happy. So you've got James 1:17, right? Every good gift, every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights. It's God who gives us these amazing good things, the rain that we enjoy, the relationships that we have in marriage, these amazing things we have, we get to enjoy them. And you go back to the garden, as we talked about in the last season, you go back to that time when God was in the presence of humanity, and it's like that was a happy time, right? That was an amazing time for God to be in the midst of his people, and he richly blesses us with all these things. But boy, like you just said, it's if the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of pleasure becomes my idol, then that's when it really becomes a
great word for it.
The problem. Yeah, because it's just that idea that you're pursuing that as the ideal in your life, and that's where I think a lot of times happiness gets thrown under the bus. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I think that's where happiness gets thrown under the bus, because we see people only pursuing happiness, and we're like, well, that must be bad, right? Happiness must be bad because, people just want to pursue it 100% of the time. And it's like, no, but God gives us these things to be happy, doesn't he?
Does God want you to be happy? What a great question. And, I mean, he has blessed us so richly. The book of Ecclesiastes comes to mind as this book that talks a lot about about enjoying life. And there is an under the sun perspective where that starts to lead him to go too far in chasing happiness. And then like in chapter 2, he realizes, well, this isn't, everything feels meaningless because that's not where it's at. But he keeps settling back into, but it is good to just enjoy life, enjoy food, enjoy your wife, enjoy your friends, enjoy your life in all the days you have. This is a gift from God. I had a study with some young people here recently where we were in the book of Ecclesiastes, and I wanted them to see both the value of enjoying life and sort of being happy now and about investing in joy forever, right? And so I brought them to Ecclesiastes, where it says in Ecclesiastes 11:9, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes." And, I was like, how many times have you heard a sermon where the preacher said, hey, have fun. You're young, enjoy yourself. And they're like, yeah, I haven't.
No.
But then we went to the but know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. But he says, remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth before the evil days come. So there's this balancing, but certainly there's a reason to be happy right now. So kind of talking about that pendulum you brought up, have you heard people kind of imply that happiness is almost empty or shallow, or just so caught up in making sure we don't overemphasize happiness, temporal, short-term happiness, that we downplay it maybe too much? Have you gotten that impression?
Yeah, well, I think that's really the genesis of this whole episode, and it's why it really resonated with me a lot, is because, I hear, especially a lot of Christians, I hear a lot of Christians focused on joy, which is almost, I think we'll talk about it, is going to be a choice. You choose joy irrespective of your situation around you. Happiness, though, definitely feels like it gets thrown under the bus for me in Christian circles, in discussions with believers. It's like, that happiness over there, that's only temporary. That's a reaction to the things going on around you. And it's like, yeah, but I mean, when things are going well around you, shouldn't you be happy? Like, shouldn't you use that moment to be happy in those blessings that God is giving you and all the things that you get to experience? So I think there is this really deep tension between joy and happiness. And it's really, I think, where the second level of this conversation hits pretty hard. Mm-hmm. If on the surface we're really thinking, yeah, people get kind of mixed up about happiness, they get mixed up about joy. Below the surface, though, let's understand happiness and joy a little bit more. And distinguishing happiness from joy is kind of where I was just headed there. It's like, how do you distinguish happiness and joy? And it's an analogy that gets thrown around a lot. And I think even you preached a sermon where you use this analogy as well. It's like the thermostat versus the thermometer analogy.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's helpful.
Like, happiness is like a thermometer. Happiness is just telling you what's going on right now around you. It's saying, all right, it's, 98 degrees outside here in Phoenix this morning. And it's like, that's just telling you what's happening around you. Whereas joy is a thermostat, which is, it might be telling you what's going on around you, but it also has some amount of control over changing that situation, or, setting a new trajectory for making a different decision. And so I think joy and happiness are distinct from each other. But I mean, in true biblical joy, I think there is a recognition that, when good things are happening, happiness is absolutely a result of that. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's helpful to distinguish. There's a steadiness to joy insofar as there's a steadiness to our relationship with the Lord, and a steadiness to our hope and our gratitude. And I think, I don't know, I'm interested in what you think of this. I think happiness and joy are both emotions. Do you think so, or do you think joy is something different than an emotion?
Well, with joy being one of the fruit of the spirit, love, joy, peace, love is clearly an emotion. I think joy fits right in there with that. I would say it is. Happiness is absolutely an emotion for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's like, how do you said joy is a choice, and I agree with that. I think that's an important distinction, but I think it's maybe not just the choice of I'm going to have joy right now. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just that simple. But sometimes I think we can get stuck in joylessness, even as faithful Christians. It is different than the distinction between being happy and sad, because I think joy and sadness can coexist.
Oh yeah.
Paul talked about in 2 Corinthians 6:10 being sorrowful yet always rejoicing.
That's like one of the biggest verses for that, right? Because it's like clearly right there. Always rejoicing yet sorrowful. I mean, how do you argue with that?
Yeah. Okay, so you can have joy and be sorrowful. So just because you're sad doesn't mean that you're somehow missing on the fruit of the spirit of joy. But I feel like joy is a byproduct, for me anyways, in my experience, of doing things or setting my posture and my attitude and my thinking in a certain direction. Whenever I give thanks to God, it starts to move me towards joy. Whenever I am just close to God, I'm worshiping, I'm praying, I'm serving others even, brings me out of my funk. And I might still be, it could be still bittersweet. There could be something that's real in life that's a reason to mourn. Jesus was mourning many times in his life. And yet I have this abiding fullness, this abiding sense of peace and lightness. And boy, it's hard to describe joy. How would you even describe joy?
I think you're right on the mark, though. To tack on to that comment about joy and sadness coexisting, I think about 1 Peter 1, when Peter's describing that you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you've been grieved by various trials. And he's really saying, like, you believe in him, rejoice with joy that is inexpressible, filled with glory. Like, your joy comes as a result of your relationship with Jesus, his presence in your life. And you're going to face a lot of stuff because of that. Like, you're going to go through a lot of difficulties. Even Jesus, when he prayed in John 17, is talking about the difficulties that are going to come. Yet, he wants his disciples to have his joy. And, we'll get into that in more detail later in the conversation. But I feel like joy comes, like you were saying, in this steadiness in our relationship with the Lord and our closeness with him. And I'm going to throw in one more verse. Psalm 16, verse 11. This verse makes me laugh so hard because of something that Sherilyn used to tell me when she was a kid. At her church when she was growing up, the announcer would get up at the end and say, we're so grateful for your presence today. And as a kid, Sherilyn would be really upset. Like, how come I didn't get presents today? She would be so upset. Like, why aren't I getting all the presents? And so Psalm 16, verse 11 says, you made known to me the path of life. In your presence, there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures evermore. Joy is truly found in God's presence, not just his presence. And so you have to write that out to really understand what I'm saying there. But you know what I'm talking about. It's not this, like, it's not the blessings alone are the source of joy. It is the presence of God. It's the closeness and connection with him that brings us such joy. And no matter what we go through, even if it's difficult, even if we're, like Peter says, grieved by various trials, we can still choose better.
And I think that is what you're onto is so helpful in sort of diagnosing a real obstacle to joy. I think for us, all of us, at least for myself, and I think others that I talk to today, a lot of times it's not sorrow that's getting in the way. It's like being scattered. It's like not having presence in God's presence.
Oh, here we are. The third one, right? Good job. Yeah. Way to go.
This idea of getting fragmented and pulled in different directions so that I'm not settling into, or as Jesus says, abiding in the Lord, in his presence, in being with him and serving him and understanding and accepting and embracing through faith the truths he's given me. And that work is the work that just shifts everything, because then, even temptations and difficulties, it's hard to get angry whenever you're really abiding in the joy of the Lord's presence. I think that's why Paul in Philippians 4 says, hey, rejoice in the Lord always, as a prescription, as a way of dealing with this conflict that these two ladies are having there at the beginning of chapter 4 of Philippians. Yep. If you rejoice, it's gonna help you out of this, because you're clearly losing your perspective, your mind of Christ that lets you have this focus on the things that matter and be rejoicing in the Lord. If you're debating and having dispute over unimportant things.
Distraction is a huge piece of that. Also, as you start to become, I don't know, I'm going to say lukewarm, or when your love for Christ grows weak, as we sing in that song, I think those are times where we forget about his presence. And again, I think we're saying the same thing in general, is that it's a forgetfulness or a distraction, or that we're not living presently, like you said, in the moment, thinking about God's relationship with us and his leading and guidance for us, that we're just kind of, adrift, and we're not really seeing things as clearly. And I think as we're talking about this deep thoughts segment, we go into the deep in our third level here, and we start to see how everything fits together, and how does joy make an impact in a Christian's life. And we've been talking around it a little bit there, but joy is a choice. I think it really is a choice. But it's a choice not to just manufacture happiness. And that's where I think this discussion is really helpful for me. It's not about putting on a smile and being peppy and because I think oftentimes we equate joy with bubbliness or peppiness or
yeah.
And that those two things can be connected to each other, but joy can be really found in very difficult, sad circumstances like we've talked about. But just that constant, like you said, abiding. And I think it really is why joy is a fruit of the Spirit. It is coming from a genuine connection of the Spirit in our life. And that comes, so vividly, I think, when we're in the Word, when we're meditating on God's Word, when we're praying to him, when we're worshipful every day. That joy is just going to be there, even though our outer man may be perishing, as we know is so often the case.
I think a great example of the choice is Habakkuk, right? As he is, and in fact, maybe this is where Paul is almost quoting or alluding to the end of the book of Habakkuk in Rejoice in the Lord Always in Philippians 4:4. He talks about how, so there's this journey from frustrated that God isn't doing anything about the evil he sees in Israel, and then to hearing that God is bringing Babylon to judge his people. And wait a minute, that's not the answer. They're even worse than us. How could you do that, God? And God's answer is the righteous will live by faith. So trust me, put your stable, loyal faith in me. And at the end of the journey, he says, so, okay, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for you to bring judgment on. I'm going to quietly wait for the day of trouble, he says in verse 16. And he says in 17 of chapter 3, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. I mean, I don't know how we would translate everything going wrong in life. I'm late on, I don't have money for my mortgage payment. I'm behind at work. I'm having my kid is having trouble at school, whatever. Everything is going wrong.
The internet constantly disconnects on me.
The air conditioning in Phoenix isn't working.
Oh, no.
And yet, and so verse 18 starts, and yet I will rejoice in the Lord. It's not, and so I will rejoice in the Lord. It's, and yet, in spite of all that, he's making the choice. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. And so he's learned the lesson of the righteous will live by faith. That's how you deal with things you don't understand, with things that are disrupting you, is you trust God is good. I know he's good. I know he loves me. I know he has done so much already to change everything for me, and he is going to work things in a way that I might never, I don't need to understand. God gets it, and I just rest in him, and therefore I rejoice in the Lord. It's a game changer.
I also start to think, though, now you begin to like look back at happiness in like a distant view. You're like,
yeah,
there's happiness back there. Wait, we've just been really focused here in the last few minutes about joy. But where does happiness fit into all of this again? Because it's like, wait, isn't happiness coming along for the ride? Like, are these really the same things? And I don't think they are. But like, it reminds me of Paul, being able to rejoice in his imprisonment in the book of Philippians and other places. Just such a joyful book in Philippians, and the entire time he's in chains. Okay, come on now, Paul. Like, are you just faking it till you make it? But like, I don't think so. Like, I think joy and happiness are very connected together. But for a lot of us, joy is so much more important than happiness. But happiness is always something to be appreciated, to be valued, I think, to be acknowledged to God. But it is a poor foundation for us to build our life around. I feel like joy is more of like the destination, and happiness is like the signpost kind of pointing us in that direction in a way. It's not the destination. Happiness is not the destination. Pleasure is not the destination. But eventually, a life of sustaining joy and deep connection to God, I mean, that is ultimately what our hope is all about, right? Isn't that what hope is? Like, hope is about an everlasting, never-ending joy and happiness someday. But I don't think we're ever going to get there fully today in our life right now, in terms of happiness, at least.
Yeah, well, that brings you to a really good place of like, I think we'll be happy in heaven. So happiness must be good. And, happiness must be something that, that God desires for us. But it's like living the story. We are here to live out our story, and just like Jesus did, and just like, the journey that God has been bringing us through, there is a battle to fight, and there are difficulties, and there are things that are going to stretch us and grow us. And so James says, James 1, verses 2-4, have joy, consider it joy whenever things get really hard.
Yep.
And whenever, like, no sane person would be happy that this is happening, like, losing somebody you love, like, that's not a reason to be happy, or, just rough things happening in the world you live in, things that test you, things that really, throw a monkey wrench into everything. But consider it joy, and then he gives a reason, because it's producing something. It's producing, in the long-term story that we're living out, a different kind of person. It's refining us into having more perseverance, more hope, seeing beyond this moment into eternity, so that we can live for eternity in this moment. So, yeah, I mean, but also, I think that this can all create some guilt for somebody maybe who's a Christian, who's faithful, who's thinking, am I having like a crisis, or am I doing something wrong? Because I feel like I'm not feeling a particular feeling that I should be feeling. And so I'm asking the question, we don't want to let feelings be our guide in our faith. The heart is deceitful above all things. But you use the term signpost. How can happiness and or joy be something to pay attention to as we're navigating things, and how could that lead us astray?
You and I have talked about, and I think we've mentioned it on the show before, but like, and this is going to sound, well, I should go get my Birkenstocks. Hold on one second. But, to feel our bodies. And again, this is for those who know, you know what I'm saying, but to pay attention and tune in to your body is a really powerful thing to know what's going on with you. So like when your shoulders start to tense and your teeth start to grit, and that like there's stress coming and you can start to feel it in your body, I think it's helpful for you to tune into those things. So in the same way, I think when you tune into your body and you can start to feel happiness, that's a pointer. And I think for me, the reminder for me is tune in and say thank you. Like that should be a moment where I turn to God and say thank you. But like you were just talking about, sometimes we tune in and we don't feel happy. And sometimes we tune into our body and we feel stressed out and anxious and sad and we're down in the dumps. That is also another moment for us to tune in and to pray to God and cast our cares on him. And like I think you were just talking about from James, you have this, at least for me, I think this is where it comes into play the most. You have this moment where you start to look ahead and you time travel into the future and you say, I don't know what's going on in the future. I don't know what this is going to look like, but I know when I get there, God will have been doing something to lead me to that place. And kind of like Joseph, you think about all the times when he was in such terrible conditions, but it was all leading him somewhere to the point where he was able to say, you all meant this for evil, but God meant it for good. And I don't think that was like a brand new, fresh revelation by Joseph. I think the entire time he was living through those circumstances, he had that in mind. I think he knew that God was doing something for him through all of those difficulties. And maybe that's a helpful reminder, is just when you are having those moments of stress and anxiety and you're sad about stuff, like it should be with happiness, as a signpost to say, tune in, figure out what's going on here. And you don't have to have the answers, but you at least need to know what your response to those things should be.
Yeah, pay attention to what's happening with you. And I think that sometimes, you'll find gifts that you have because whenever you are greeting people in the, Sunday morning service as they're coming in and you're happy about it. Well, hey, that can actually be a signpost to, hey, this is something that I am particularly good at. I'm particularly good at going and, visiting an assisted living place, because that's something that is a blessing to me. I didn't want to do it, this particular task, whatever it is, but then when I was doing it, I noticed that I experienced joy or happiness. And I think those can be helpful. It's not that you only do the things that bring you joy and happiness, but it can be helpful to notice what those things are and be aware. Awareness, and the Bible word for it is watchfulness, right?
Yeah.
Watchfulness, being aware of what's going on and circumspect what's going on within me, what's going on around me, is a really helpful thing.
And I think it's really, what we're saying here is that I think we can appreciate happiness as a gift, that, we use these moments as a blessing from God, of course, but our focus should really be on fostering joy and having this kind of stability and relationship with God that just brings us joy and a trust in him that can see that though I might not be happy about this right now, though this may not be a great situation, physically speaking right now, I trust him enough to stick with him even in the difficult things. I think that's kind of what we're saying here. And
Yeah.
the best way I can think to do that is to have a relationship with Jesus. And maybe that's where we're headed next.
Yeah, we always want to bring this back to Jesus, and we want to bring this back here to something that Jesus said here in a minute. But what we were just talking about, looking forward, looking for the joy beyond the moment. Like, I might not be experiencing all of the happiness I want. It makes me think of how Jesus, Hebrews 12:2 says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Yeah. He was living for something that he saw out in front of him. There is an eternal joy that was infusing everything he did. And I think if we come to understand Jesus' joy, then we can better understand the joy he wants us to have. So going back to what Jesus says here in John 15:11, he doesn't just give us a command to be joyful here. He's talking about the vine and the branches, and he says, these things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. And so what do you think is the key here to understanding joy that this little statement of Jesus helps us unlock?
It's hard to pull this verse out of context, right? But John 15, verse 11, we know what this is talking about. This is the vine. This is Jesus' whole conversation about the vine and the importance of being connected with the source of life. And so I'm seeing Jesus here saying that joy is really rooted in a relationship with God, and of course, rooted in a relationship with him that makes that connection possible. It is being driven by the will of God. It's listening to God's instructions, his command, and just being totally purpose driven by all of that. And I love the verse you used there in Hebrews 12:2, because it's a perfect encapsulation, holding two things side by side, which should not make any sense. Jesus was joyful to die. And he was joyful to die because he understood what was coming as a result of that. He understood what was on the horizon for that. And so the moment itself was sorrowful, of course, but the happiness that would come after that would just make that entire sorrow melt away. And so much of our life is called to have that same attitude, isn't it? Just to realize that you are going to be, as he would go on to talk about in John 17 in his prayer, that he wanted his disciples to have my joy fulfilled in themselves. And in that prayer, he's really telling them, look, you're going to suffer because I suffered. You're going to suffer just like I suffered. So you're going to go through things, but my joy can be in you and be full. And I think the whole reason for that is because there's a vision about what is coming ahead and not what's going on right now. And so it's just a perspective shift. It's about perspective. It's about purpose. And it's really just having a different view of difficulty than, my natural person just really does not feel comfortable thinking about, difficulty in that way. But that's what joy is, really. That's what Jesus' joy is.
Perspective and purpose. Those are two great words. And they're not emotions, right?
True.
So it just highlights again, whenever we shift our perspective, align with our purpose, have faith in Christ, abide in Christ, put ourselves in a relationship of obedience and honor and trust in him, then we used this word earlier, then joy is a byproduct. That's the choice. The choice is to be right with Jesus and to abide in him. And a byproduct, another word for byproduct, is a fruit.
Hey.
It's a fruit of the Spirit. It's a fruit of following the Spirit and living with Jesus. And so Jesus says, you're going to have my joy, and he wants us to have his joy fully abiding in us because we're abiding in him. And so if his joy is rooted in communion with the Father and obedience and love and hope, then that's the kind of joy that we're going to have. And what a cool thing. This joy, he is living with joy because he is ever communing perfectly with the Father and the Spirit. And he's inviting us to be part of that communion, to be one with him as he is one with the Father, and to have the joy that he has in the Father. If we could just if I can just keep my mind where it needs to be and keep coming back throughout every day to trust in him and abide in him, then it just happens. It just is a steady. I mean, I guess maybe there's, ups and downs, but there's this sense of him with me. And that is another name, at least for me, that is another name for the joy of the Lord.
You know what else brings me joy?
Yeah,
What brings me joy
Reach out and touch someone.
is a reach out question. And boy, I have missed that little stinger. Okay, so what does it mean here to abide in the vine? We've been talking about this word a little bit. What does it actually look like in your life to practice this kind of thing today? What are you thinking of when you're thinking of abiding in the vine, practically speaking?
Well, Jesus says we need to abide in his words in this passage and abide in him, and he's going to produce fruit in us. Abide means to live, to dwell. It's where am I locating my life? And I'm locating my life in him. And so practically, I mean, those are big theological ideas, I guess. Practically, for me, that means removing the obstacles, like what we talked about earlier, the scatteredness.
Yeah.
So to center myself, to slow down, to have little oases,
Oasi?
little places in my day where I can find to drink of the living water, where I can find to enjoy his presence in the desert of life, so to speak. So I need to find moments, to create moments in my day, every day, to pray, to reflect on who he is, to meditate on scripture, to make sure that I'm aligning my choices with where am I getting out of tune with his will for me, with the Spirit's will for me. And as I am just conscious of living in Jesus' presence and following him and obeying him and trusting him, I'm abiding in him, and the fruit just comes from it. So, like, practically, I guess, to summarize that, for me, it means tuning throughout the day into what he wants for me.
You basically gave me every single answer that you possibly could, and I appreciate that because you've taken all of the ones that I could have provided off the table. But I will agree with you that I think, these little connective moments throughout the day where you're checking in, and that's helpful in terms of
Oases
of check-in, however you might refer to that. But I do appreciate having those regular moments of prayer or those regular moments of Bible study, those regular worshipful moments throughout the day.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, what we've been talking about here is just making joy a choice and keeping that connection, because the further you are from being connected with the Lord, the further I am from really thinking about his word every day, meditating on it, the easier it is for me to get caught up in the circumstances in life and not be the kind of thermostat that tries to change the temperature of the day.
Yeah, I think this is a really helpful distinction for me, is the difference between trying to find happiness or joy versus connecting to the vine and noticing gratefully happiness and joy. It's like not removing it from my vocabulary and thought process,
or manufacturing it yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big
it's appreciating it gratefully, and just to bring it back to what we want for people. What do we want for our kids? What do we want for the people in our lives and everyone? And we do want happiness, of course, but what we want more is this abiding joy that is just like a deeper thing that is going to change how you make choices in your life. It's really going to change everything because it comes from just living in the presence of God. And it's It's the best thing. It's so great. It's so great. And you forget to pay attention. And you forget also, I think, the new normal that we have in Christ, where that's just like a regular thing, is to live with joy and to forget that not everybody has that. Not everybody is living every day knowing the one who made everything knows them and loves them and is working in their life, and everything in the end is gonna be okay. And everything in the end is gonna be like in his hands, worked out.
Well, I think that's well said. And I think it leads us actually in to our challenge for the week.
I am ready to face any challenges that might be foolish enough to face me.
So if I could summarize what you were just talking about in that last section, you were sort of standing atop the mountain looking at your life and sort of viewing it from afar in this big sort of grand perspective. You know, at the end of all of this, we want joy and we want this abiding connection with Christ. I think one of the most helpful challenges to make that happen is to implement it in small ways during the day. And so this week, instead of chasing a feeling of joy or happiness, abide in Christ and gratefully notice his blessings throughout your day. And that can pop up in lots of different ways, but just making it a regular part of your day, of your routine, these oases of the day that you can just tune into. What made you happy today? What has God blessed you with today? What are you struggling with that maybe God is going to lead you into a stronger and more purposeful, abiding, trusting kind of place at some point? All these different moments we can tune in and really, I think, connect with a deeper sense of joy.
Yeah, James 5:13 says, "Is anyone among you cheerful? Let him sing praises." So, if you're happy, you're feeling cheerful,
clap your hands. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Wrong song.
Yeah, if you're happy and you know it, there's a lesson right there. If you're happy, try to know it. and
then clap your hands.
And then clap your hands. And and focus on the vine, right? Focus on staying rooted in the presence of Christ and in the life he is leading you towards by obeying him and trusting him. And boy, I just want to quote all the songs. Trust and obey. There is no other way to be happy in Jesus.
Thank you, Ryan, for quoting all of the hymns to us. I appreciate that. All right, so as we wrap up this episode, this has been a really good one on joy and happiness and the confusing distinction between them. Hopefully, we've sort of clarified a little bit. I'm taking away from this conversation with a call to action for myself to really grab onto those intentional moments throughout the day. I think finding times, regular oases of time, I suppose, to make those intentional choices, to be more joyful, to notice and show gratitude to the Lord. I think those are times where I can really just tune in to being a more joyful person. Happiness is good. It's just not the ultimate goal at the end of the day. What about you?
I was thinking about the Oases thing too. That is a big one for me, just like that I'll be working this week. And with that, the understanding that the choice of joy is not like smiling through the pain, like grit your teeth, but there's a smile on, it's not fake. It's not willful. There is a choice of will, but it's a choice to keep tuning into God and God's ways and then letting that fruit be produced. It's a fruit of the Spirit, not a fruit of Ryan. And so knowing that joy is going to come with my following the Lord and really slowing down my rushing life to focus on him. And then I think, something we didn't talk about, but is sort of behind all of it in my mind is the effect that has in our life. We talked about how it can affect, not being angry, affect you in temptation, affect you making better choices. We didn't talk about the verse from Nehemiah that says the joy of the Lord is my strength.
Yeah.
But that idea that whenever I have joy in the Lord, I am stronger. And so there is a very practical, it's not just about, happiness is nice. Joy is a fun feeling to have. It's like, this is how we overcome. This is what we bring to the battle, is the strength that comes from the joy of the Lord. So what is the devil going to attack? He's going to try to take your joy away. And so how do you get it back? Go back to abiding in the vine, abiding in his words, following him.
Well, that's solid. So this has been a good conversation on joy and happiness, and really, I think sets the stage for this entire season. I'm really excited this season to be focused on joy and happiness and the fun, and we're bringing it back to Bible Geeks old school. We're going to do some really cool stuff this season, especially in October, which will just give you a nod that some fun stuff and very nerdy things are going to occur in October. Thank you all so much for tuning in. On our next episode, we're going to cover a Christian's relationship with time. We're going back in time. We're going to stay in the present, and then we're going to travel into the future. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be great. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And you can find show notes for this episode in your podcast player of choice or at BibleGeeks.fm. You can also follow along with everything that we've been talking about here by subscribing to the show if you're not already. I don't even know how you're listening to this if you're not subscribed to the show, but we would love it if you would rate and review the show. That's something we don't ask for very often. But please, if you're back for another season with us, give us a rating, drop a comment in there in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. We would really appreciate that. And until the next conversation, everyone, may the Lord bless you and keep you.
Shalom.